Well, good evening and welcome back to Rainbow Investing, where we examine a spectrum of ideas to improve your long-term wealth. Now, in this video, we are going to look at why millennials are screwed, absolutely screwed. That is, if you don't start planning for your future today. Now, to understand why this is the case, don't worry, I will back up this rather strong statement with some facts here. Let's first look at society's traditional model for how we are supposed to live our lives. So starting in the post-war era, governments constructed what's now known as the welfare state. Basically, you get a job straight after finishing school or university, you work, you pay your taxes at that job until you reach retirement age, and that used to be 65, and then the government would reward you for your life of paying tax with an old-aged pension, which is enough, supposedly, to live a modest lifestyle and is indexed to inflation. You then live off this pension until the day you die. Now, as you might imagine, this is a very expensive program to operate, providing a basic living wage to every person over the age of 65 in the country. So the government finally realized this in the late 1980s and early 1990s and implemented what's now known as compulsory superannuation, which you might be familiar with. It's one of the key legacies of Prime Minister Paul Keating. It involves everyone being forced to put at least 9.5% of our salary during our working life into a retirement account, and that's where it remains until retirement age. Now, it's worth saying that your super is normally invested in assets like shares, investment properties, bonds, and cash, and the idea is that if we all have enough in our super, we won't need to draw an aged pension. However, this system has been undermined by a number of factors, including expensive and poor superannuation fund performance, and ongoing debate surrounding whether 9.5% is actually enough to fund a 30-year plus retirement, especially if your job earns you less than an average salary or wage, or maybe if you take time off to raise kids or go traveling. All those things prevent you from contributing to your super fund and, by extension, your retirement. So for these reasons, I think it's fairly safe to say that many people will still need to rely on a government pension in retirement. And that brings us to why we're really screwed as a generation, as millennials. So in the 1970s, there was about 7 working age taxpayers for every 1 retiree. Today, that number is about 4 working age taxpayers for every 1 retiree. And it's estimated that by the time we reach the year 2050, it will have dropped to 2. So that's 2 taxpayers for every 1 retiree, which means that if that retiree is drawing an aged pension every year, there are only 2 people to cover this payment through taxes. And that's before we pay for everything else funded by government spending. So that's health, education, our defense forces, and our roads, just to name a few. And here we have a graph of how the government raised the $446.91 billion it spent on government services last financial year. As you can see, the lion's share of this comes from income tax paid by workers on wages or salaries we receive. More workers means more tax for the government, and less workers means less tax. And here in this graph, we have how the government spent this money last financial year. Again, as you can see, by far the biggest chunk of this money goes into social security and welfare payments, the largest of which is, you guessed it, it's the age pension. So here is a graph, another graph, showing the breakdown of the social security and welfare budget in more detail. You can see that in the last financial year, assistance to the aged cost the budget $63.2 billion, which is a massive sum of money in its own right, especially if you consider that New Start, which is otherwise known as the unemployment benefit or the dole, only cost just over $10 billion. But here's where things really get interesting. This is a graph of the projected amounts the government is expecting to spend in the 2022-23 financial year. As you can see, assistance to the aged has grown from $63.2 billion to $80.2 billion, an increase close to 30%, 1/3, in just 4 years. So imagine what these income tax and pension numbers will look like in 2050, when there's supposed to only be 2 workers for every 1 retiree. And these statistics are all taken from government projections, by the way. So my takeaway from all this, I think the government is going to struggle enormously to provide an adequate safety net in the form of an aged pension in just a few years from now, let alone a comfortable living allowance. Healthcare costs are also rising fast, from about $76 billion last year to nearly $90 billion in 2022-23. So for millennials who don't start thinking about this and maybe start planning ahead, the only hope is the superannuation system. And that, as I said earlier, is a treacherous ship to book a seat on. Me personally, I don't really have a lot of faith that either the super system or the pension system is going to provide an adequate retirement for myself. So I think the only solution is to start investing. The younger the better. So pay off your debt, get a savings plan going, at least 10% of your paycheck every single paycheck, and start putting money into shares or investment properties. It's the only way to get your money working hard and build your long-term wealth. With interest rates at record lows these days, your cash is actually going backwards if you just let it sit in a bank account. So saving isn't enough. You have to start investing. Now, if you want to learn more about easy ways to get started, I have several videos that I think would be useful, so check them out if you'd like. I'll leave some cards in the top of the screen here. But there you go, guys. That's why I think millennials are screwed if you do nothing about your finances and start thinking about money in a different way. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, please make sure to leave a like on it. It really helps my channel out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't already, you might like to subscribe. We do videos on personal finance and investing. So why not hit that subscribe button and help me out just that little bit more. I'd also be very happy to hear what you guys think about what I've said, what you might be doing. Maybe I'm wrong. If you think I am, or if you agree, just leave it in the comment section and I'll be sure to get back to you. Okay guys, I will be back soon with some more videos, but for now, good night and thank you for watching.